You're trying to just motivate your team all day long, but you're not finding motivated people. It's not your job to motivate your team. It's your job to find the motivated people. That's where it starts.
No one knows who you are when you pick up the phone. You can choose the role that you play.
It's a double-edged sword, for sure.
Hello and welcome to a special Making Revenue Tick episode. I'm joined by Gabe. Hello, Gabe.
Hello, how are you?
I am wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan of yours, first off, and I'm really excited to be here. We're going to have a good conversation. Can't wait.
Absolutely. Every time I speak to you, I come away energized. So I think that the fact we're doing this on video for other people to enjoy is going to be fantastic. I know that there's loads of topics that we could have discussed. And when we had our pre-call, we ideated a lot of different topics, but kind of what we landed on was the motivation of salespeople, particularly, because it's a hard job. It's not something that everyone can do. And I think a lot of the time there's an environment created that doesn't get the best out of people. So I know that's going to be a topic that's close to your heart as someone who's built such a successful business that's also remote and works on behalf of other clients, something that I've got a lot of experience of. Why is the topic, Gabe, of the motivation of people something that is close to your heart?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important because, we look at our business as our service is our people, right? So as in a service business, the people is your product, right? We don't have a widget. I don't have, an algorithm. I don't have any patents, right? Our proprietary information is really just being able to elevate people's abilities from a enablement and a support and a skill set. But that all goes out the window if they're not motivated, right? So attitude to us is really everything. We like to say that a lot. The desire is something that is hard to find. But once you have that really fills in all the other gaps when it comes to skill set, talent, and enablement. So it really is important to us because if we don't have a motivated sales floor, we can't provide best-in-class services to our clients, and that's what they pay a premium to us for. So it's what makes our business go around, frankly.
Yeah, it's a fascinating point because I know because we're in the same kind of business, or I was for a number of years, 12 years in a similar business to yours. Wasn't quite as big in North America, so I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, particularly from a client side of this, where you walk into a sales floor and it's just dead and you can hear a pin drop and no one's making calls. You're like, how is this business generating money?
Exactly. No, it's funny because you said good, bad, and ugly, by the way. It made me think of it. There's a lot of ugly in this space, but the reason why there is, and there's a lot of, misconceptions and a lot of stigma, right? But the reason why there is because of the thing I mentioned before. The barrier of entry is zero, right? Or nil, if you will. And the reason why there's a lot of maybe bad actors is because anyone could join or anyone could start and anyone could say, hey, I cold call for a living, and boom, now you got a cold calling agency. You know what I mean? So it's like anyone could start, and therefore many do. And unfortunately, it crowds the space, and unfortunately, not everyone knows what they're doing. And so that's sometimes the case for sure. But I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to make sure that that was a point that we mentioned.
I jumped in. Yeah, I think we're passionate about the subject, right? I think just obviously a lot of people that are going to be watching this will be maybe from my network. It will be people that already know you and see us all kind of over LinkedIn. For people who don't, could you just give us that kind of brief intro of everything that's interesting about Alleyoop?
Sure. So, I mean, my story is pretty simple. My origin is I figured out that, at a young age, people actually pay me money to talk. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, right? I was 11 years old and I was trying to raise money for a fundraiser for my school. And my mom and we made t-shirts and we sold those t-shirts to raise money. And I sold the same really bad overpriced t-shirt to my uncle 11 times. So he bought 11 of the same t-shirt that he probably never wore. He probably used it as a rag to clean his car. And I realized at 11, hey, this is amazing. I made money and all I did was talk. So that's how I got into sales. And so fast forward 25 years later, we provide Alleyoop as a sales development agency. We're one of the largest in the world. We're fully remote. And, we have been able to serve amazing clients. Half of our business is large enterprise clients like ZoomInfo, Adobe, and Peloton. We've built their go-to-market teams from inception, and then the other ones are, new companies, emerging companies, funded companies, founder-led sales companies that are looking to, start somewhere, and we come in and build it. And then what's cool about us is we actually give it back to them, right? So they can hire our team, they can grow their internal team through our people and our partnerships, and one day they can fly. And it's great to see those companies succeed because if we were part of that process.
Yeah, interesting. So you developed that bug for sales pretty early on, like a lot of entrepreneurs, to be honest, right? A lot of that happens in that kind of teenage and formative years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you're married into the culture, but I'm an Italian. All right. So we have this ability to talk, I guess. I learned from
I
my
knew it made
grandparents.
sense.
But no, seriously, like it's funny. I have a funny story. We were talking about it at the family dinner table a few weeks ago. How did you learn the thing? I literally remember I was a kid. I was sitting underneath the kitchen table at my grandparents' house, and it was my grandparents and my aunts and uncles would play cards all the time. They played pinochle, and listening to them just talk back and forth was like my entertainment. That was my iPhone when I was a kid, right? I would just sit under the table and listen to my grandparents yell at each other playing cards, and I figured out, okay, this is how conversations should be happening sometimes. So it was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? So we're obviously talking about sales motivation, and you have these special breed of people, kind of like very instinctive. It's in your DNA to be an entrepreneur. Maybe that's an Italian thing. Maybe it's something else. But a lot of people don't grow up wanting to be in sales. It's not like you go to uni to be in sales. And there's probably a few layers that we could talk about as part of this. You've got like, how do you know who to hire? So you hire motivated people rather than trying to motivate people who don't want to be motivated. And then there's that whole journey of getting them to become successful and then developing them through their career. So if we talk about that kind of that first stage, which is getting the hiring right, what do you think are in your experience, the most important things that add up to a very highly motivated sales team?
Yeah, that's great that you brought up. Actually, it was a mentor of mine a long time ago. I was having a hard time. I recruited a sales team and they just weren't performing. And I came to him and I asked him for advice. And he said, listen, Gabe, your problem is you're trying to just motivate your team all day long, but you're not finding motivated people. So it's not your job to motivate your team. It's your job to find motivated people. And that's where it starts. Now, of course, there's ways and motivation is required for sure to take it to the next level, but don't look at it from zero to hero. Look at it from let's bring in the best we possibly can, and then take those people who are already independent, entrepreneurial in spirit, and then take them to the next level with motivation. So that's what we do first. We start with the recruitment process. I'll be frank, we don't like to hire net new salespeople anymore. uh, Decade ago, that's all that we did because the SDR role was very new to the industry. Now you got about 800,000 profiles on LinkedIn with the title of SDR. So there's a lot out there. And so I like to hire people who I know have already kind of cut their teeth on outbound or making calls and prospecting. I don't want to have to, worry on whether or not that person is scared to just pick up the phone, right? Because that's half the battle is just getting enough energy to pick up the phone. So we want to source people who, one, have that inherent desire and have proven already that success other places. And then, frankly, we put them in the fire, man. We literally take them through what we call our gauntlet. And part of that interview, 4-step interview stage that we have, ends with an audition. And we treat them like, if you would be an actor for a movie, you would have to audition for the part. So we have them literally audition for the part. We give them scripts, we give them objections, and we tell them, okay, cold call me and let's get into it and see what happens. And it's funny, but that's really where the magic starts to happen. Pretty quickly, even as an outsider, like, yeah, that person's got it or that person doesn't got it. And that's how we do it.
I like that. I love the way you described it as actors. I remember my first manager, amazing guy called Mark Phelps. He's actually coming on to the main podcast in a couple of weeks. And we used to, like you say, this was back in 2007, so SDR wasn't a thing, right? I was a lead generation specialist.
Exactly. The
And
longest title name in the world.
exactly right. It sounded really good
Yeah.
with my £7.20 an hour paycheck, you know.
Yeah,
but there was
man.
a lot of people who, like you say, like when they start,
Hmm.
they've got a load of fear, you know, just a fear of the unknown as much as anything, but certainly a fear of rejection, not knowing how they're going to perform, all that sort of stuff. They get thrown off. And he used to teach that no one knows who you are when you pick up the phone. So when they pick up the phone, it could be anyone, right? You could be the owner of the company. You can choose the role that you play. And he used to do this wonderful thing where he talked about your favorite actors and ask you about who your favorite actors were and why, and then the actors that you hated. And people always said the actors that they hated were ones that just weren't believable. They weren't congruent. It felt like you were watching someone act rather than someone who kind of brought the words to life. When I talk about that example of, and you've mentioned the term actors, like what does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, it's a great analogy because I use it all the time. If you think about it, a lot of people come to me like, "Hey, I don't like scripts," or "Can I just make this my own?" or like, "Can I just change the words?" Like, here's the reality: Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, whoever you like, it's not their words, guys. Like they're reading other people's words, right? Before they even get the part, they read the script to determine whether or not they want the part. It's not their words. They're literally just reading a script, and and they make millions of dollars to do it. Now, of course, why would someone pay you millions of dollars to read a script? Anyone can read a script. My 11-year-old daughter can read a script. What's the point? Well, they turn those words into their own and into an amazing performance. And to your point, the ones who take that authentic approach to acting and turn other people's words, a script, right, into their performance that's truly believable and authentic, that's where they make millions and get Oscars. And so sales is no different. It's other people's words. You turn it into your own and you make an amazing performance, and not in a fake or manipulation type of way, but in a truly a way to articulate a message with belief and conviction. That's where salespeople start to get to the next level.
Yeah, I love it, and particularly, I guess, because your agency land, right? Like I was, I remember as a rep in my sort of 9 months of being a full time rep before I got into management, I must have worked on six different accounts. I know that's obviously not the ideal one, and you'd like to have dedicated reps, but it just happened that as part of the way campaigns ended and me getting better, I got access to different types of projects. And so you learn really quickly to pick up different value propositions. And it might be on one campaign we had five different promotions or topics that we were going to talk about. And like massive companies like CA and HP, you could be on one section, then switch to the next section. So you've got that ability to be able to pick up words, translate value propositions, connect with people. It's not the same as in a vendor where you might have to learn that thing once and then just learn the different products. It's completely different in agency land, right?
It is. See, it's a double-edged sword for sure. You know, when we're interviewing people, I ask them this question. I say, "Hey, do you like change? Do you like fast-paced? Do you like, wearing a lot of hats? Do you like, multitasking?" And the reason why I ask those types of questions is for your exact point. You may be here for 2 years and you may have sit on 3, 4 different type of client campaigns, and they may be completely different types of brands and companies and offerings. Now, a lot of people gravitate to that. A lot of people love that. A lot of people like the idea of versatility. Some love just knowing one thing and one thing alone. They probably wouldn't be a good fit in the agency. But on the flip side, here's a funny story. We had a company, they got a $65 million in funding. They're blowing up. Everything was looking great on paper. They bring us in to augment their sales development team. We're crushing it for them, booking tons of meetings. Everything's great. And then all of a sudden, the CFO comes in and says, "We're out of money." Right? They told the entire company we're out of money, and they laid off 90% of their staff and fired all their vendors, including us. We didn't do anything wrong, but we lost a client. And I had 5 SDRs who worked for us on that campaign. Here's what's interesting. That was 2 years ago. All 5 of those people still work here. Right. So when you work in an agency, you do have if you're good, you do have the ability to have long-term career, job security, if you will. Again, as long as you're good, you have job security because, there's always something to sell. And we just backfilled that, those 5 people with a new client that was in onboarding, and they all saved their jobs and they weren't affected that way. So there's a double-edged sword. I like the agency model versus, working at a startup or working at something that's risky. But at the end of the day, you could go IPO and, have a nice exit too. So there's always two types of ways of looking at it. But yeah, the agency model is definitely something that has that long-term opportunity for people if they choose to.
It makes sense. And it's interesting that you talked about now sort of preferring the route of hiring proven SDRs who have, at least cut their teeth and they've got something about them. But your business has evolved, right? And I guess that in this world where what you were doing, I guess just from knowing you, in the way that I do, what you're doing last year probably isn't good enough for today. And the things that you were doing 10 years ago wouldn't make you successful today. So you have to elevate your business in terms of the quality that you deliver, because actually it's become a bit commoditized. And there's loads of talk about, should we get rid of our SDR teams and bring in AI to talk to people? And actually, you've realized that you can't just go and take people from the street with the consistency that you need to have this reputation in the market as being kind of like the go-to SDR agency. What is it that drove that decision? Like let's just talk about that switch in your mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to your point, I mean, it's always evolving, right? And the big piece that I think is evolving the most, and even more recently, especially with AI, is the enablement piece and the tech stack piece, right? When I was making cold calls, I was on an Excel spreadsheet piece of paper. Actually, when I was making calls, you actually physically had to pick up a phone that had a wire attached to it, right? The technology is evolving almost quarterly and definitely yearly. That needs to be reviewed, tested, and proven, more importantly. And so I would say, to your point, yeah, it is a different type of beast when it comes to who you're hiring, why we're hiring the way we're hiring. And it's not just for the fear of, the unknown and picking up the phone. That is a big reason why. But it's also, I look at it like this. You can sit in a Honda Civic or you can sit in an F Formula One car. They're both cars, but I know for a fact it is significantly more difficult to drive an F1 car than it would be to drive the Honda Civic. Nothing against Honda Civics. So what the SDR function today is like an F1 car with the amount of technology that is available than it was years ago. And so that's another reason why we're looking to make that shift, and why we hire people who at least have, sat in an F2 car maybe before they were promoted.
Yeah, exactly right, exactly. And then so if we, I love that. By the way, Honda make bloody good F1 engines. So,
They absolutely do. They absolutely
but they
do.
don't put them in the Civics.
Red Bull's done very well with the Honda engines
Yeah,
in the
exactly
last
right.
three
And
years.
it's moving to Aston Martin, isn't it, in 2026? That'll be interesting.
Exactly.
Anyway, side quest.
Now we can
So
talk. We could do a whole podcast on F1.
I'll hold you to that one. I've got a
Okay,
little Lando Norris F1 car here in the background.
there it is. Oh, Lando. Yeah,
I
that
didn't
was
actually. I
crazy a
didn't.
couple of weeks ago. What
Yeah,
happened to
it
him?
was.
Oh man.
Yeah, absolutely amazing, amazing. So the topic of this one was about the motivation of people. We talked about hiring motivated people because it's really hard to try and motivate someone who doesn't want it. It has to come from them. There's those kind of innate things. But I guess a bunch of people who are watching this will be like, well, look, we have an SDR team and we can't motivate them. We can't get them to be where we want them to. And obviously, we don't know the full path that they went to in terms of who they hired, did they have the right background, all those sorts of things. But what we see is the result, which is KPIs not being hit, pipeline not being delivered, marketing being frustrated that their value is not being recognized, salespeople being frustrated because they're not hitting their quota and not having enough opportunities, and then people ultimately losing jobs because revenue numbers are missed. So it's pretty bad in terms of the problem. When you're speaking to clients and they're looking to make that decision to outsource that function or maybe turbocharge the launch of their company with some best practices before they eventually in-house it, like with some of the examples that you've mentioned before, what do you see as the typical sales development environment that vendors have when they're not focused in the same way that you guys are?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I spend a majority of my sleepless nights thinking about that all the time. And we're constantly thinking, what can we do differently, better, more effectively to increase the culture and the we call the ecosystem, the Alleyoop ecosystem. to ensure that the SDRs are performing at the best of their abilities without burning people out. Right? We want long-term relationships with our employees. We have a 3.5-year retention rate, which is insanely impressive compared to what industry averages are, and we're proud of it. But it's multifaceted. So I would say a few things. One is just a mantra. Our mantra is very similar to Richard Branson's. It's the client is not number one to us, and I'm okay with our clients hearing that from me. It's not about our clients being the top priority. It's our team, our staff. If you take care of your staff, they'll take care of your clients. So just that mantra coming into it is how we operate. And I think because I was an SDR before I was a CEO, I think I know that more than most because I lived and sat in the exact same seats my team does. And so I understand it from that perspective. Secondarily, we customize our incentive plan. So, we're all motivated by carrots. We all are, but it is what it is. So if we can put the carrot out there and it's a customized carrot, not everyone may like carrots. Maybe someone likes apples. Maybe someone likes oranges. And so we actually survey our team and say, okay, if you qualify for the top 15 in the company, do you want a bonus? Do you want tickets to your favorite outing? Do you want to buy a big screen TV, or do you want 2 days of paid time off? And we literally poll it. Now, it's not that hard to do, and it's sometimes very actually cost effective if someone wants 2 days off versus $1,000 bonus, right? And so we motivate them more individually. And then on the other side, we have virtual sales floors. So we're fully remote, right? And so doing this remotely is different than doing it in office. But we have a virtual sales floor. Everyone's on camera. Sales managers are in those floors. We're making calls in an environment that's similar to being in office, but working from home. And it's not a big brother micromanaging environment. It's a great job, doing different types of celebrations, high fiving, encouraging, training, coaching. Hey, don't do that. Say this next time. Laughing at prospects who yell at you or something like that. Just having fun and doing it in a system that makes sense, I think, is the way to do it. There's more, but those I think are two big points.
Well, they're really big points, yeah. And I think that the whole remote thing is fascinating because we've seen this, right? Like I remember all of my first 12 years in SDR land as an SDR team manager, ops manager, business unit director, working in Miami, Auckland, Barcelona, England, 5 days a week in the office. It was just the way it was, right? It wasn't, you weren't remote. And then in England, we were much slower to bring in things like hybrid and then remote. And then that was massively accelerated by COVID. And then suddenly everyone was remote. And then businesses were like, oh, we can actually keep the lights on by having all these people working remotely. And then they went, oh, we can hire people from all over the UK or maybe even the world now because we don't have them to be within a 20-minute commutable distance to be able to get into the office. Our talent pool's bigger. But then 90% plus of them went, oh, we've lost a bit of control here. The results aren't where they were before. It's not that this COVID bubbles burst and the kind of 2021 numbers are starting to fail. It's people's fault. They're not as motivated. Let's bring them back hybrid. Let's bring them back fully remote. But you've made that work. So what are some of those things that you've done to make, obviously one of them is this virtual floor, but what are some of the other things that you've done to make remote better for your people and for your business?
Well, I think you just laid out the timeline of the world, right, with COVID. And a big reason I think it works for us is just, again, we were prepared for it, meaning we had no idea COVID was going to happen. We went remote in 2017. So we actually built and switched from in-office. We had 2 offices. We switched from in-office to remote well before COVID was a thing. So we actually built it around the decision to do it. And I think most people were forced into it because of COVID. They had no choice. And then it backfired because they never prepared to do it. They were forced into it. They try to just kind of figure it out as it was. And then they're like, this isn't working. So let's just go back to our old ways. And that's kind of like the timeline for most people. So if you're going to do it remotely, pretend COVID didn't happen and do it from a planning perspective on that's what we're going to do. We're going to be a remote first company, again, if that's a decision you guys make, and build around it. So to answer your question, it was a decision before. We weren't forced into it. The remote sales floor is for sure a great opportunity, but it doesn't end there. It just kind of starts there. We actually don't use Slack. We also don't use Teams. We're one of the weird ones out there that uses Zoom as our internal communication. And why is because you can call someone like a FaceTime call on Zoom very quickly. And you can pull people into Zoom meetings. A lot of companies use Zoom to do meetings, and then they use this Slack or Teams to do internal. Well, I know they're all catching up, but long story short is it allows us to make calls. Now, we also mandatory video. Now, at first, we started this in the beginning. We bought everyone a 1080p external webcam, and we sent webcams to everyone before we decided to go remote. And so, because again, salespeople mostly are extroverts. Salespeople actually like other people, right? We're not developers here, right? So, we actually like people, and that's what mostly typical salespeople like people. So the better and more effective conversations we can have with video really has solidified our ability. I mean, I went to my chief operating officer's wedding before I even met her face to face. Do you think like these are like we have fostered relationships in our company that are second to none without having the physical, in office approach. So video is very, very important to us. And by the way, no one gets mad about it. We dress up. We're like we're going to work. And if I think you approach it that way, that'll be one of the great things you do.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because I think one of the biggest arguments we hear from people is, and it makes sense, why they want people in the office is because you get that osmosis of learning. And in the world of SDR, if you get like a bunch of no's or someone's just really, really rude to you, or you just completely bomb and you do a terrible job, having someone that you can joke to about that straight away, and maybe someone who can go, actually, I heard you say this thing, or I really like that you did that thing. That stuff is massively important when you're in that role where the expectation around productivity is so high and your energy that you transmit on the next call has to be in the right place. And I think that what people tend to get wrong, and you can tell me if this matches your experience, but is if they have remote teams or they've got SDR teams who are hybrid, those people are often left to themselves and they might do a kickoff call in the morning, like a stand up, and then they're just making calls throughout the day. And then someone kind of checks in with them at lunchtime to look at the KPIs, or maybe at the end of the day, and they do like a quick wash up, and they're like, "Well, the team hasn't been productive today," and they phone the same number 6 times, and we're not hitting our targets. But it doesn't work. You have to create that environment. You've done something really clever through technology to go. It's like we're in the office. It's like we're together. There is this competition. There's this rivalry, and everyone's sharing, but you don't have to be commuting every day, 5 days a week to be in a specific location, which means our hiring talent pool is only from these specific parts. How important do you think that osmosis and that immediacy of kind of feedback and support has been to the culture that you've managed to build?
It's vital. I mean, a couple of fun things. One, our marketing team created virtual backgrounds for everyone based on the geography of where they live, and we do an Alleyoop logo in their background. So, my head of partnership, she lives in Orlando, so she has a universal Orlando background with an Alleyoop logo, and the background looks like a roller coaster. I got people in London; they have a picture of the London, Big Ben, and all around the world. So no matter where you live, as soon as we get a new geography, they get a virtual background custom to them, and it sparks conversation. So when you're talking, you immediately, I'm looking at your background, and I can probably bring up 16 different things to talk about just by looking at your background. So that creates that, organic chemistry right away. And it's just a virtual background. It's stupid simple, but it works. Secondly, one of our sales managers bought a little gong, the little ding that you hit when you get a sale. We used to do that in the office, and we didn't bring it with us when we went remote. So he bought on Amazon $6 gong and bought one for every one of his people on his team. And so when they're on their virtual sales floor and someone gets a meeting or gets a lead, boom, they hit the gong, and then everyone else grabs theirs from their desk and they're hitting it too. And it's hilarious, but it just cohesive. Now all the other managers like, I got to get that. And they have different types of ways to incentivize just to celebrate high five throughout the day. But yeah, listening to people's calls and looking at KPIs is just the boring stuff. but even being in the thick of it and celebrating and laughing at prospects. Hey, I look at this doozy. We do something. Another thing I thought about is we do 3 times a week. We do call camp, and it's a town hall. A lot of companies just do like town halls or all hands on meeting once a month. We do it 3 times a week, and we only spend 30 minutes. It's really quick, very quick. Everyone gets on a Zoom, 30 minutes long, and we listen to 2 or 3 calls, and they're good, bad, and ugly. We don't put new people in the hot seat in their beginning of their time with us because we don't want to embarrass anyone. But after a month, like, okay, here, do my call, because we give positive feedback, and then sometimes we throw a zinger in there that's just like, don't ever call me again. This is ridiculous. Like one of those. We put those in there, and we all laugh about it, but it makes it feel like, hey, it's going to be okay if you hear negativity. It's going to be okay if not everyone's going to be an alley-oop or a layup. And we do that company wide 3 times a week. And I will tell you that osmosis happens through those types of things.
Yeah, I love it. And you obviously mentioned Alleyoop, and there's obviously being in America in 2017 for a year, the sporting culture and passion around sport is so high, much higher than it is in England, where it's really like, men like these sports, women like these sports, and a bunch of people just don't care at all. So that is so intrinsic within the culture that you guys have got. What I was going to ask you is in terms of motivation, right? So most people don't want to be salespeople. They kind of fall into it and then they discover that they love it, they're good at it, it's enjoyable, they're learning all that sort of good stuff. What do you find are the backgrounds of the best performing SDRs? Are there any sort of common backgrounds that often add up to a blooming brilliant sales development rep?
Well, I mean, to your point, it's sports, right? Anything really revolving competition. You don't have to be, in the U.S. football is huge, right? And really, that's pretty much the only country that it's huge. So it's not about that. You have to just be in an environment where it brings out your competitive spirit. We're in the middle of the Olympics right now, and it's a great time to talk about like world sports, right? But at the end of the day, it's like if you've excelled in some sort of competitive environment, then sales could be an opportunity for you. And we ask those things. I would say, a question in the interview, tell me about a place. It could be personal, it could be school, it could be work, where you're in a competitive environment and you excelled in what you did to get there and what you did to win. And that's the question. And then I hear all different types of answers, but it usually is revolved around some sort of team competitive environment that they've been in before. And so, it's funny when we thought of the name Alley-oop, of course, it's a basketball term, but it was a rep that was on our sales floor who loved basketball. He was very good at the role. And he would use the word all the time as a verb. Hey, I just alley-ooped 3 meetings over to our client, or I just alley-ooped another one, or hey, congrats on the alley-oop, man, great job. And he kept saying it just because it was the way he talked. And we're like, that's such a cool analogy. Let's just use that as our company name. And so that's how we did it, and it works for sure.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So let's talk about where people get it wrong. So when people are trying to motivate sales development reps and trying to create that world class high performance culture, what do you think are the most common things that are missed that means that they get low performing, low energy cultures?
Yeah, I think it's about an environment. They don't look at it from an environment. They're just very methodical and numbers driven. I have a finance degree. I'm a numbers freak, right? I love metrics and KPIs, but at the end of the day, it's boring. You know what I mean? Like, my cousin's an accountant. I love him to death, but what he does is boring. And he's also not he's an introverted person. It's a perfect role for him. If you're working with salespeople, these are extroverted, outgoing, competitive, fun loving people. Just the personality itself, in most cases, don't relate to things that are boring. So if you're just metrics, KPIs, it's not going to be the way to do it, and it'll backfire. The other thing is money, and I know this is weird, but and I love money. I love nice things, and I love being incentivized and making bonuses and commissions, and it drives me. For first 10 years of my life, I was commission only sales. I loved it. I know a lot of people would freak out and never do that, but at the end of the day, money is not the only thing you just throw at people to motivate them. And a lot of sales managers think oh, let's just throw more money at people, and that's what's going to motivate them. It's not. Is it a tool? For sure. Is it the only tool? Absolutely not. And that's where I think sometimes people get it wrong.
Yeah, interesting. And you obviously talked about doing these surveys where you ask people what they would actually like in terms of incentives. What are the most common non-financial incentives that people absolutely love to receive?
I mean, time off. I know it could be considered financial, but people like to work to not work, if that makes any sense, right? And for instance, sometimes people like a half day on a Friday. Sometimes people like the ability to take a time off. One of the things we did is we gave all the top 10 in our company a birthday PTO. So on your birthday, if you hit the top 10, like I think like 6 times in the year, you get a birthday PTO. Now everyone gets birthday PTO just for signing up to work here, and that in itself is a great culture and great environment spiff, if you will, that doesn't cost hardly anything. But at the end of the day, it makes a big impact. So that I would say is the biggest thing people that is not monetary money, or something gift wise. People like to just have time off with their family and not have to worry about calculating their sick time.
Yeah, yeah, I know, right? I remember as a rep, one of the things that I used to love was swag, right? So we had like client client merch.
So we actually have, it's funny, we have a Squad Locker. It's a great company. Little plug for them. Don't get paid on this. Squad Locker is a cool company that allows you to create your own store. And they do really cool clothes and different types of swag, but it's all on your brand. So we have an entire store that, we buy, swag for all of our new employees. They get shirts, hats, and cool stuff. But we incentivize them. So spiffs throughout the week. Hey, anyone who does this, this, or this gets $50 to their Squad Locker, and it is money, but it goes to that store, and then they buy cool shirts, and then it helps your brand and help. And then everyone's like, "Oh, I just got my new Alleyoop shirt," and they're on video and they're looking at it, and it's super cool.
Yeah, I love that. We used to kill for those. I remember if there was like an opportunity to win like a HP hoodie, I was going to win that competition that day. It was just going to happen. And then we used to do things like a early bird incentive. So if we had like a start time for Europeans, it was 8 in the morning for the time difference because it was a UK office. The UK's was 9. But if you got an opportunity before your start time, then you could go and have like a 30-minute morning break. And then it was like beach targets on Friday. Not that the weather in England was ever really nice enough to go down the beach, but if you hit your 150% of goal for the week, then you could go on Friday. And things like whole paradise targets, where if the office over a quarter achieved a certain goal, then you could get a whole day off. And people love that stuff. And it's like, obviously, people go, if you were looking at that from a financial numbers perspective, you're like, well, this is activity that we're missing, and we didn't get those 200 calls by that amount of reps per day. But the motivation it drives for the hours that people are in is well worth that trade off, right? Why do you think that more people don't do it?
I just don't think they're creative enough. I just don't think that they're like, maybe there's red tape and maybe they just feel like, hey, they're here to stay. And then here's an interesting thing. The FTC in the United States just passed a law that non-competes are going to be completely removed. And it goes in effect in September of this year. And it's going to allow for competition, but essentially non-competes don't exist anymore. And I think that is going to be a rude awakening for a lot of companies that aren't investing into their culture and investing into their people, instead of handcuffing them to, hey, you can't work at a competitor anymore. That's going to be gone. And so if you're not investing in your people and investing in your culture, they will be gone. And there's nothing you can do about it. So I would start now if you're not doing it already.
That's fascinating. Yeah, we've worked on a few American assignments where we found exactly the right person who wanted to leave the company, and then when it got to contract stage, they were just getting threatened with lawyers that they couldn't
Yeah.
leave the business. It's literally like you say, having handcuffs. That's such an
Yeah.
interesting change. So what drove that? Like, what? Obviously, people would complain about it.
Yeah, I mean, they wanted to inspire innovation, right? If you can't leave other companies, they wanted to inspire entrepreneurial, so you can't start your own business. They wanted to, inspire the ability to drive competition. They did it as a country to compete with, the world, and compete with creating more innovation. And so that happened this year. And absolutely. We don't do non-competes anymore, and we used to a long time ago because it was just kind of standard business. But we look at them like, hey, listen, I don't want to work. I don't want to have someone work here who doesn't want to work here. It's like, there's no point to that. If you don't want to work here, I'll be your biggest fan to go somewhere else. I've helped people leave us to go other places. And, I always say Alleyoop alumni is a really great place to be, because you can come here, learn a lot, and then be an Alleyoop alumni and go be a director of sales. I mean, the SDR role is really a lily pad, if you will, for many. And so we don't, like I said, we don't try to do fear tactics to keep people here. We actually encourage them to go. And what's funny is a lot of them go and come back, and a lot of them don't go and stay. And so that's what we've seen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One thing that we found with the company I worked at is the reputation that we developed around the quality of training that we did and the quality of people that we had became famous within the industry. So most clients that started to work with us would look to hire our teams, and that was a path that we created for people. As well as, now I've sort of switched into the recruitment side, and I'm now serving those clients. Those clients go, oh, this company, yeah, you work with those guys. We hire everyone from them, because it's just become famous that that's the culture. And it'll be exactly the same for Alleyoop, right? A lot of the people that you've had as top performing SDRs will become the heads of sales, VPs of sales, CROs, founders of different businesses. You get that alumni out. It's almost like a sleeper cell of people who believe in your DNA and your culture. And it's an amazing thing to look for, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a great example. A good friend of mine, he was the first SDR ever on this company. When they started their business, they outsourced their SDR team to us. And he was the first SDR on the company a decade ago. He then managed the account for this client, and then became a VP of our company, Alleyoop. And then when it was time for that company to going to be a public company, he left us to go work at that company. That company is ZoomInfo, and he's currently the senior vice president of sales development at ZoomInfo. And he was the first ever SDR on that campaign, working as an Alleyoop employee. So a great story of an Alleyoop alumni, and we have hundreds of people who have done the same thing. But if it was like, if we try to, no, you can't take him, or no, he's ours forever, like, people are going to leave anyway if you have that type of mentality. But in this way, you have a good relationship, and then that company comes back to you into perpetuity for anything else in the future. And that's a great way to, I think, to do it.
100%. I think that culture you created around a couple of things. One is you're creating a really great environment for them to learn and grow. They're constantly being rewarded and incentivized to be able to make mistakes freely and perform and achieve their goals. They have the ability to work remotely. So if they need to move their life, they don't have to leave the company, which is like a typical reason why a lot of people might move. That's why you've managed to create this high level of retention, alongside obviously a bunch of other factors. But what that means for clients, and obviously I'm just spitballing based on what you've said, is if you work with you guys, you're not going to get a brand new green SDR team that needs to be taught everything from fundamentals, might not like the job, might not want to pick up the phone, and then you're going to have a manager trying to get the best out of these people. You just get to tap into this highly trained sports team ready to go and set you up with alley opportunities, right? What's not to love?
That's exactly it, man. You want to come work here, you could be great at selling
I
this
know, right?
type of stuff.
Amazing. Well, look, Gabe, I know we could definitely talk all day, but
Sure.
let's save it for another time. Maybe we'll do another pod, probably not on F1, but on another topic close to our hearts. But I really appreciate this. Is there any message, if someone's listening to this right now and you want to talk directly to them, it was all about, if they wanted to create the world's best environment for their sales development organization, or they just wanted to go and get the benefit of being able to tap into that for a while until they're ready to go and do that themselves, what would your message to them be?
Yeah, well, there's a free way and then one way you have to pay for. So here's the reality. We post as a company, we have content creators and they're operators. They're not just sitting there making content. Our COO, our AEs, our partnership manager, our head of recruitment, and myself, we're six of us, and we create 22 posts a week that we put on LinkedIn, and we share that with the world's trade secrets, things that we've been doing. It's all real life experiences, and you can learn what we do for free. And we do it all through LinkedIn. So I recommend following us and me and seeing that content. I post 7 times a week. The other side is if you want to ever be a client, you obviously got to pay for that piece. But reach out to me on LinkedIn and love to chat with you about what we can potentially do together. That's all.
Amazing. Good man. Well, look, great. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Let's speak again soon.
Thanks, Richard.